Hey guys, Darren Carly, Coach of Wiser Pods, and welcome back to another trade mode heading into round 21. 4 weeks left of the fantasy season left to go. Let's see if we can continue to push up the rankings and try our best to have the best final 4 weeks of the season as possible. So let's just get straight into it. I didn't think we want to mess around too much. There's not too much in terms of strategy chat this weekend. I think a lot of the same stuff that we have been talking about for, probably the last 4 or 5 weeks, where it's really just tossing up between 23rd premiums, even 24th premiums, and also just continuing to upgrade your best 22. It really comes down to what your personal preference is. There's benefits on both sides and negatives on both sides, realistically. So it's really up to personal preference and see how you go from there. At the end of the day, I can't make the decision for you, but yeah, I have my personal preferences, which is sort of the 23rd premium sort of avenue, and that's where my sort of trades are at this weekend. So I'll go through those, and a lot of my rankings do also incorporate, both upgrading your best 22, but also some other 23rd premium options that we could look at if you're in that sort of camp. So that's probably enough. We'll jump straight into the trade out targets this week. It's probably one of the more open rounds that you could look at realistically in terms of your trade out targets. Obviously, if you have the likes of a Doherty, he is the one that needs to go. His unfortunately season's done. Sorry, his career's now done after retiring against Hawks last weekend. That was obviously something that we knew going into this week. So I'm sure you would have had your trade plans. It looks like you got away with it a fair bit, obviously with not too much carnage in terms of we didn't get any more injuries that we know of yet. I think we got away with a fair few things there, so no real concerns realistic about my top five. So I have got Sam Doherty at number one for those sort of reasons. He just has to go, unfortunately. He's not going to be doing anything for you anymore. And at the likes of 850 odd K, yeah, he's a decent enough price tag that you can get him up to a pretty big player by downgrading one of those sort of rookies that we've got on our bench. So that's a pretty easy option, I would have thought. Sidewaysing him and potentially another player that's underperforming does make it a bit restrictive because you would need probably 200, 300k to be able to get him up to some decent players, unfortunately. So more than likely you would have to use a rookie to get him up. So yeah, he just needs to go. But well done, Doherty, for your retirement. Very good fantasy player in his day. Number two, I have got Caleb Daniel. It's one of those ones that he has been so underwhelming for a long period of time in this season. He hasn't hit a ton since round three, and just really been hitting a lot of 70s, dropped a few 60s. He does seem to drop these really low scores every now and then. We saw a 57 back in round 9, but everything in between then and now has been, between 70 and 90s. Hasn't quite hit the ton. 97 was his best. So he hasn't been a standout, but he hasn't been the worst player at the end of the day. But at this time of the season, we really want to try and avoid these 60s as best as possible. And I do think there are some really good options this time of year that we're really looking at. 4 weeks to go, there are plenty of options that have a decent run on the next 4 weeks that we can sort of trade him to that really aren't that much more expensive. That can run through the remainder of the season. But you could also go down the avenue of having a 23rd premium and just throwing a Caleb Daniel on the bench. North do play a lot of these last sort of games of the weekend. They play a lot of Sunday games, so they do play quite late. So he's someone that you could always roll into as a bit of a safe sort of 70 to 90 dude. If, one of the other premiums or one of the other forward players hasn't performed their best, then he's another person that you could just rely on as a 7th forward and just get a consistent sort of 70 to 90. However, with him, there is some growing concerns that his role is changing a little bit. He did spend a little bit more time away from the defensive 50 this week against Geelong. Obviously, they got belted. He still took, I think, 7 kick-ins, I believe. I think the coach took 8, or was 8 and 9, one of the two. So he did still take plenty of kick-ins, but just got nothing else of the ball. He's got 18 touches, which is a pretty low standard of his that he's had, lowest he's had in a long time. So that was hugely disappointing. Only 1 mark. Again, hasn't hit that since he had a 77 against Richmond. And only four tackles, which is probably a bit more of a luxury in his eyes. He doesn't tackle a huge amount, but he did spend a lot of time away from the defensive 50 in this game. He even spent some time in the CBAs. didn't really make much of an impact there, and even spent a little bit of time forward. So there is some growing concern that his role in this side is becoming a little bit less reliable, and that could mean that they're looking to change up a few things come with the final 4 games of the round. At the end of the day, North are not playing for anything. All they can realistically do is try and perfect their structure and really look towards the future, which, Caleb Daniel at his age of 29, yes, he'll probably still be around for the next 3 or 4 years, unless they really look to go a different direction. But you can't deny that he has some decent talent and he's got some good knowledge on his head that he should be one that still stays in the side. I don't see him being dropped. He's not like the same as a Fisher, in my opinion. I think he has much more experience and a bit more skill level there. So I think he'll be fine. It's just really trying to figure out where his best position is. Uh, Obviously, we've seen throughout his career, he's spent it throughout the field where it's halfback, half forward. Not a huge amount on the inside, but yeah, definitely could see it at some stage. But I wouldn't see it at North. They have far too many stars in that midfield, in my opinion. So yeah, there is concern for me there. So realistically, if you can trade him out, perfect. Otherwise, you can just hold him. He should be okay this weekend against Saints. They are a tougher matchup in terms of like midfielders, but halfbackers is a pretty neutral matchup, so should be okay if he does play halfback. It's just again that concern with what his role is going to be. So I don't mind trading him out if you can. Again, he's 800 or just over 800k, so you are having to spend up a little bit to get to the sort of the better players in that line. But yeah, if he's anywhere else on your field, then definitely there's plenty of better options there for sure. Number 3, I've thrown in sort of all these underperforming players that have been really underwhelming. Long, I've spoken about him for the last couple of weeks that his time is pretty much up. He's now over that good run that we sort of spoke about post his bye, where he's had this good 6-week stretch. Now he goes into Brisbane Lions, Hawks, Adelaide, and Melbourne. All of them are quite, not great matchups in terms of midfielders. So I'm not expecting anything amazing from him. Not that he has been amazing in the last that period of time anyway. He's just sort of been that 70 to 80 guy average and even dropped a few lower ones. So I'd be prioritizing jumping off him quite frankly. So here's a high priority in my opinion. Probably ahead of Chera. I know Chera's been quite underwhelming, but he's still that one step above the likes of a Long, in my opinion, with some decent matchups. Freo's not too bad. Suns have been easy in the past, but are starting to be more restrictive here and there. Port Adelaide, who knows how to read them? They've been one of the toughest matchups all season, but then then they just have this really off games, so they just don't show up, and midfielders just go berserk against them. And Essendon, we know where they're at. So the run for the likes of Cherry isn't too bad. So and again, with the midfielders being the way they are, there's a question mark whether it's worth upgrading him because he could still pop a 120 for you at any given stage. But I still think if you have the luxury to trade him out and he's your worst player, then definitely I'd be making an upgrade there for sure. Bergman's probably the highest priority of all 3 of these sort of guys just because his role is so versatile. Dropped another 39 on the weekend. Just really, again, didn't show up for this game. Started off pretty badly, kicking it backwards in this game, which was pretty funny to watch. And just really, whether he lost a lot of confidence based off that, whether he was embarrassed or whatever, just didn't really get amongst it. Spent a lot of time half back, took a couple of kick-ins, but that was pretty much about it. And yeah, I guess the question mark around him is, can we start him next year if he's going to be a full-time midfielder? And that's probably what I'll be looking at, but we'll cover that at another stage where we look at what next year looks like at the end of the season, I think. So, yeah, I think he's a pretty high priority, even though the matchups aren't the best. They aren't the worst. It's just, yeah, he's, again, one step off the ladder. 4 weeks of quite bad performances, hasn't hit a ton in a while, and just, yeah, really one step off the top 6 to 8 sort of defenders, in my opinion. And if you're playing him in the midfield, yeah, there's still better options there, in my opinion. So he is definitely another one that needs to go. This next sort of marker at 4, Zorko is a really interesting question because there are some sneaking suspicions that there is a bit of an injury underlying there. There's been spoken about a bit of a foot injury, the same thing that Will Days had, where it's just a bit of a hot spot in his foot, I believe. So that can obviously linger a fair bit and just really put him off the pace. and it's showing against 55 on the weekend. It's pretty dreadful. It hasn't really been amazing for a period of time. Like, yeah, we saw a 124, 114, back around 14, 15, but post buy has been quite underwhelming for what we normally come to expect from Azorka after his breakout from last year. And looking at the run coming up for him as well, it's not any better. The next three are pretty tough, potentially even a tag against James Jordan or Brad Campbell. Against Sydney in round 22. Then Hawks to finish off is a neutral matchup. So I wouldn't mind jumping off him if you're in that luxury position. That he is a decent price tag at just under $1 million. So you could potentially downgrade him to a Whitfield that saved you 50k, and then you're able to upgrade another player up to the player that you're looking for. So that could be an avenue that you could jump off him and get to someone else that you're looking for as a bit of a sideways maneuver. Again, that's more focusing on best 22. So that's the question mark around him. If I was in the position that I had as Zorko, I'd potentially lean jumping off. I think the foot concern is enough to scare me off, and the high break even now, while he's got a terrible run as well, I'm not expecting him. Not owning him isn't going to hurt me in what I'm thinking, right? As a non-owner, I'm not looking at Azorko thinking he's going to absolutely kill me. Whereas, that's how I felt early in the season where he was having these big games, 120s, 130s. So I'm not seeing that in his future. So there's no, I think if I was on the boat, I was an owner, I would be jumping off in that opinion. So there's that one. In a similar limelight is Merritt. Now, we've obviously spoken about him for a little while. Before even post buy, obviously he's been super up and down. Has moved back into the midfield in the last 4 weeks and has done okay. His lowest score's been a 99, which in hindsight is pretty damn good. Averaging, I don't even know, 103 in the last 5, 105 in the last 3. But it's really looking at what his matchups are to come. He's obviously got Sydney this weekend, which in the past has been a James Jordan tag. Now, there's going to be some question marks whether they still do tag the likes of a Merritt, just because both teams are done in terms of their seasons and neither are making finals. Essendon are obviously in no real competitive nature at this stage, just with a lot of their injuries. So realistically, Merritt is their only damaging player at this stage. Obviously, you got the likes of caddies and stuff, but when you're getting no supply to him, how he can't really be too damaging. So I think Sydney should walk over Essendon quite simply. It's just really the question mark is, do they still look at tagging? I don't know if it will be a full hard tag, because again, those sort of scenarios I do expect Sydney to win, but I still expect him to probably stand next to him and play that sort of defensive mid-roll, because even 2 weeks ago when we saw the likes of Sydney versus North Melbourne, we still saw the likes of James Jordan go to a Kobe McKercher off halfback. So they are always happy just to throw and make James Jordan be a bit more accountable in any weekend, even though they do expect to win. So I do expect him to spend some time on Merritt this weekend. So I'm expecting a little bit of a lower one. However, I still expect an 80 plus. He did score an 80 against them early in the year, and I do believe that was when he wasn't playing as much midfield. Obviously, he scored 2 goals, and that to save that was a bit of a luxurious position. But as a full-time midfielder that he is now, we have seen him in the past be okay when it comes to talk to tag. So not expecting ceilings, but I'm not expecting an ultimate low floor either. So it's a bit of a tough camp when you're a bit of an owner like myself. I'm had the opinion that I wanted to trade in the weeks leading up to this, but looking at the next period of time, I don't know if I see Al Mullen going to him anymore. They haven't really run that Mullen tag in a little while, so I think they might just avoid that. And again, the cat should just walk all over Essendon next week, so I'm again not expecting that to be much of a concern. St Kilda, again, Windhager hasn't been doing anything for a period of time, so it's all just flags here and there that they have the option to do it, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen, right? So I'm probably more on the fence that saying they're not going to tag these next couple, the final 3 weeks. So realistically, it's only this week that I'm really worried. And when I'm looking at the top 8 midfielders for the remainder of the season, it's pretty grim when you get past sort of the top 4 or 5, even top 6 realistically. You're looking at your Brayshaws, your Bontempellis, Dawsons, day costs. Matt Rowe's obviously in there now. I'm sure I'm missing a few others as well. But yeah, I think Merritt can still just sit at M8 for the remainder of the season. Yes, he may cop attention here and there, but still should be okay when there's not many other people putting their hands up at this stage. So if you're in a luxurious position and you can absolutely move off him, and he's your worst player, then absolutely go for it. And if you want to jump off him and he's your avenue to get this other player up because he is nearly worth $1 million, then go ahead. But I don't think he's an absolute must trade out in my opinion. But he's definitely one worth considering with the flags coming up. So definitely something to consider. And finally, I just had number 5 as the cash cows. Obviously, a lot of us still have a lot of cash on our bench, whether that's a Liddy with 400k, a Johnson with 500k or 450, a Clark still there with nearly 500k as well. Tom McCarthy, obviously he's absolutely breaking bank at the moment with 650k, so he could be an easy avenue for you to go one up, one down, and easily get up to that big premium as a 23rd premium, which I know a lot of people are looking at this week. So that's definitely worthwhile. Ralston as well. So I'm just saying, there's a lot of cash on our benches, and at the end of the day, with 4 weeks left to go, you really want to try and get all that cash off as much as possible. Get in these big primos, whether that's upgrading your best 22 or getting a 23rd, 24th premium. You do not want to be running into the final couple weeks of the fantasy season with, these big money makers that aren't contributing to your score on field at the end of the day. So definitely worthwhile. However, with Tom McCarthy, I do think he's a little bit of a different kettle of fish because he does have the capacity to put up a decent big score that is fieldable for us. He is a looping option, so I don't think he's a must trade out. Definitely against this weekend now against Melbourne, he can put up a pretty decent score. He does play the 3rd game of the round, so you will be able to have a look at it and then make a decision from there. Okay, who's my next worst player? Loop him on if he does have an 80 or 90 plus, which hopefully he does hit a 90 for us. So definitely something that could be worthwhile, but definitely something to consider when it comes to next week with a tougher final 3 games of the round. He'll be worth about close to 700k next week. Should be a very easy upgrade for a lot of us. So that is the top 5. Just scanning through a couple of the other trade out targets that a lot of people are looking at. If you have a Lloyd Meek, it is time to go. He's up against the Riley O'Brien as the toughest matchup as a ruckman. So realistically, you're just targeting one of the big ruckmen up top, whether that's a Royal Marshall, Gorn. Brody Grundy's probably a little bit out of the stretch because that is costing you over 200k now. He's at $1.2 million. Even the Tim English does have a tougher run in comparison to the other 3, but definitely still someone worth considering. So I think that's definitely an easy upgrade of, it's 40, 50 points potentially. That's an easy upgrade for you. That's hurting every single week. Jack Martin, definitely worthwhile jumping off after a poor performance last week. That's just been a bit of a failed trade, unfortunately. With that role change, that's very frustrating as an owner. However, you could also look at him as a 7th forward if you want to go down that route. Just at the end of the day, he's capable of putting up these decent sort of 70 to 80 scores if he pops up for a few goals with a decent couple of matchups. Port Adelaide shouldn't be too bad this weekend. Obviously Essendon and Richmond to finish off the final round of the season. So definitely could be one that you want to look at as a looping option. So have a think about that. We'll probably lose cash this week though. So if you're looking at cash wise, which my advice is don't really worry about the cash too much. This time of year, it's pretty straightforward that we can get to whatever player we're looking at realistically. Harley Reid was the other one I should have mentioned in the sort of injuries. Obviously, his season is done with a syndesmosis injury, unfortunately. So his season is done. So if you were one of the unfortunate players that traded him in, with his recent form, he unfortunately now needs to go. So yeah, unfortunate for those that did trade him in so quickly. Spoke about Zorko. Rankin's an interesting one because I guess he does fall into that category. He has been underperforming, but I'm just purely looking at his run. Eagles, North in his next 2 of his next 4. Even the Hawks should be okay. Scored a 81 against them early in the year in the wet conditions. It's just the concern around the role. Obviously, he's no longer playing as a midfielder. He's playing more as a half forward, small forward realistically. So the supply isn't as great in that position to get those cheap possessions. He's really having to work a little bit harder and getting sort of the best defensive midfielder. Getting the best small defender that is able to lock him down. So it does mean his scoring is down with back-to-back 60s. But yeah, I'm really just looking at those two matchups, and again, he sort of falls into that category. If you can loop him, then absolutely that would be amazing, particularly this week. He does play on Friday night, so definitely something that you could have a look at, see if he scores well. If not, then you could get on a 7th forward to cover his position this week. Flanders can go. I was never super onto that. Lohman was another one of those rookies that can go. Taru as well. Rosie, from all reports that I've seen, he said he's good to go. He's recovered well from his hand. Obviously swelled up a little bit post game after copping a knocks here and there, but hasn't done any more damage to it, so he should be all good to go for this weekend. So he's part of the top sort of 2 or 3 forwards. Sorry, top 2 or 3 defenders in my opinion. So I wouldn't be jumping off him there in my opinion. So he's staying. Dale's just shocking and loves competition and just goes forward and does nothing there, so he can go as well. And I'll sort of wrap it up there. There's a lot of other, unique options. Pretty much anyone here that can go. Steele was the only one that I wanted to mention. I am not in the camp of trading him. He comes up against North, one of the easiest matchups for midfielders. I say back him in one more time. He obviously had the form leading into this game. Just whether there was conditions or just something was going on, obviously, with that shoulder. So, yeah, I'd say give him one more chance. I wouldn't jump off him just yet with still a very decent run. He could always bounce back this week, but if he does perform again pretty badly, then you can look to jump off. I wouldn't be jumping off at Shadows for one game. So that's just my opinion. I'm obviously not an owner, so I don't have super much attachment to it. So I'd be waiting and seeing with that one, in my opinion. You could easily hit that 130 quite easily. So that is a trade out targets. Let's move on to the trade in targets. And we will start with the defenders. I think that's probably the easiest space to go first. So I think we all know where the story is coming from. It is Nasai Wanganimulera. If you do not have him, you are breaking your team to get him in. He by far has the best run, and he's going to be a massive captain option for the final 4 weeks of the round that you are going to want to own him in one shape or another. Yes, he is super expensive, nearly at $1.2 million, but you will want him in your team because he is probably going to be the highest averaging player for the remainder of the season. He's probably going to hit multiple 140s unless he cops some rests here and there, but he has North, Richmond, and Essendon. Probably the 3 easiest matchups for midfielders in the next 3 weeks. So he is going to be a massive captain option. We've seen what he's able to do as a full-time midfielder in the last 2 weeks, averaging 149 in the last 2. Even in his last 4 to 5, he's hit 143 times. So you will want him. I don't know how I can stress this enough. You want him. So just get him in at all shapes and sizes. Number 2, we've got the likes of Lachie Whitfield. Obviously, it's been a lot of discussion for the last couple of weeks. Obviously, had a bit of attention last week, but really didn't cop him too much. Last 3, averaging in the 115 ranges, so he's doing quite well. And a decent run home. North is an okay matchup. It's not great. Suns, about the same. So it's not amazing, but it's not the worst at the same time. We expect him to be pretty good though. At the cheap price of 936k, he should be well inside the top 6 on the run home. So I really like him as an option this weekend. He also has a decent history against Western Bulldogs, so he went 117 against them early in the season. So he should be another one that goes quite well this weekend and hopefully on the way home. So definitely jumping on him if you can. Number 3 is Nasai's teammate in Jack Sinclair. Since Wang has gone into the midfield, Sinclair's just got a lot of that half-back ball and getting a lot more of these marks that we're used to seeing from him back in his sort of heyday. So he is just up there. Again, looking at the run, he should be pretty elite to finish off. question marks around top 6 defenders. I'm not sure I have him quite in there just yet with, a lot of big names up there, but yeah, should be quite good. Like I said, North on paper seemed like a good matchup, but actually for defenders isn't the best just because the supply back there isn't much. It's pretty much just going forward a lot of times. So he'd have to work pretty hard to get a lot of cheap +6s if they're looking to chip it around a fair bit. However, I say that St Kilda aren't like the be all end all team at the end of the day. They are still a struggling side, so North could be on top throughout this game at some point, and that could lead to Sinclair having possessions off kick-ins, halfback, and whatnot. So I still think he's a great trade-in target at number 3 there. Number 4, I've got Max Holmes. Just, he's absolutely killing it, along with Bailey Smith. Yes, he has these low games every so often with his 80s and 70s, but definitely with the run he has. Port Adelaide, again, can be tougher, but can be easy at the same time. Essendon, really easy. Richmond, again, super easy. You're just going to want him. He's definitely part of my top 6 defenders for the remainder of the season. And again, that knows how to get it done. And obviously, if Bailey Smith was to ever miss out, he just absolutely goes massive. So I don't see any tags coming his way. Maybe does a James Jordan tag him in round 23? Is that maybe the only question mark? Does it go to him or does it go to Baz? I still think it goes to Baz at this stage, just with a bit more of a limelight on him. But I still think Holmes is probably a bit more damaging in that sense. So it is a bit of a toss-up there. But I think they'll both be fine either way. So definitely number 4 for me. And then I've thrown in a couple options down here at number 5. And this is really looking at your 23rd premium sort of levels. You got likes of Noble. He has a pretty good run over the next 2. Richmond, obviously, this weekend. And then he goes into the likes of the Carlton. So they are very 2 good matchups for him. So he's showing a capacity to hit these sort of 110 scores. So if you're looking for a cheaper D7, not that I advise a looping option in the defensive line at this stage because a lot of our defenders are quite stable. If you're looking in the zone, then definitely Noble could be that sort of guy for a short-term 2-week play. The final 2 aren't the greatest in my opinion. He is a bit more expensive though at 918k, so that's definitely something to be notable of. He just a bit more expensive. Whereas the next 2 guys are a bit cheaper. You got likes of Sicily, who I'm not a huge fan of. Obviously, he's my captain, but he's finding form in the last couple of weeks. He obviously looked amazing against Carlton last weekend, but obviously a much easier matchup than what he's got in the final 4 weeks. Obviously, Adelaide, one of the toughest. Collingwood have been one of the toughest as well. Brisbane, a pretty tough matchup as well. Melbourne are an okay matchup for defenders, so should be okay in that one. But if you're looking just for a pure D7, someone that you could look at early on in the week, because I do think Hawks play quite early on every single week this week. So he plays Friday night this weekend, Thursday night next week, then plays Saturday, the 4th or 5th game at 3:45 in round 23, and obviously we don't know what's happening in round 24 yet. So he does play fairly early, so you will be able to have a look at him before looping him on. So that's definitely an avenue that you could look down, who has obviously shown a bit of a ceiling, but the matchups aren't really there to support his evidence. But yeah, 703k with a break even of 33. He's a very achievable from whatever trading you're looking at, or it's only costing you 50k to go from McCarthy to Sicily, which is just ridiculous when you think about it, based off what we know what Sicily can do from a couple of years ago. And I've also got Shields here as just another potential defender option, even cheaper than Sicily. He's actually a downgrade from McCarthy at 644k, playing as a full-time midfielder at the moment with obviously a lot of the injuries at Essendon. He has shown a capacity just to hit these sort of 90 scores when he plays full-time midfield. Look at that sort of stretch when he was playing as a full-time midfielder, 97, 91, 93. And since coming back, he's gone 70 and a 98. Lower time on ground, which is the frustrating thing, but he's the second best player at Essendon at the moment. Was the second highest scorer for Essendon on the weekend. So I could see him being a potential option that you could loop with if you're in that sort of boat. It's probably not the best option, but if you're, struggling for cash, definitely a worthwhile one to look at. Essendon plays the four. Sorry, they play at 3:45 against Sydney. So the fifth game of the round. So definitely is a tricky one to loop with, but not impossible if you've got a few of the other looping options down the bottom there. So yeah, definitely that's something I wanted to throw in there just as a bit of a if you're looking for that 23rd option. I know a lot of people are looking at Farrell, however you want to say his name, but he's a 300k. I wouldn't trust him too much. Buslinger, if you're just looking for a bit of cover, I'm not sure if he's holds his position, but he did quite well in that game with 15 touches, 9 marks. Obviously, with the downgrade targets, I just wanted to mention this as well, is we're pretty much just throwing away positions. Unless you don't have like a cover at some stage, if you've both your defender rookies are just dead, nothing to them, and there's a laid out, then that's you're copying a donut. So there is some risk there to it. Whereas I'd feel a bit more comfortable if you had someone, even if it's just a shit rookie that can just give you a 30. If something happens, then that gives me more comfortable. But hopefully you are in the position that you can have a bit more of an underpriced premium there to loop with at this stage, but not everyone's in that position, obviously. But yeah, I think we're more than happy to throw away positions now. Just get as much flexibility in your defense as possible, sorry, in your team as possible, so then you can loop wherever you're looking at. So I wouldn't be looking too much into downgrade targets anymore. So, you're like paying up for your buslingers and stuff like that. I'm not a huge fan of. Just try and get it as cheap as possible so that you have maximum amount of cash to play with the week following, because that's really what we're trying to do for the remainder of the season. But we are looking for trading targets here. I think we've covered off that. I haven't put Sheasel in my top 5 here just because he does have a tough run home. Like, Saints are one of the toughest matchup for midfielders at the moment. Giants as well, and the Crows. So he's only got one good matchup for the remainder of the season, but he's just been super consistent, hitting that 110 quite often. Obviously dropped a few lower ones a couple weekends ago, but he's generally pretty safe, but doesn't really have the super big ceiling now that he's playing forward, unfortunately. So yeah, it's just not one that I'm appealed to if I wasn't a non-owner. I am an owner though, so I'm just looking at holding potentially. If I was in another position, I would potentially even look at trading him out at some point if that was the case. But yeah, that's probably defenders done in my opinion. There's not too many others worth considering there. So let's go to midfielders now. So my top 5 midfielders is none other than Matt Rao. I think we've all just got to admit now that this is not a fluke or any sorts. He's just absolutely having a breakout season now. And you're getting a walk-up matchup against Richmond this weekend, so he should have another blinder. Yes, he is expensive, and yes, we should have caught onto this a lot sooner, but that's just one of my poorer senses in this game. I'm not super great when it comes to breakouts throughout the season. Like, before the season, you can sort of see it happening, that they're going to have a role change or something like that. Matt Rouse hasn't had a role change or anything like that. He's just really picked up in form, whether he's been given more accountability, he's getting more touches. Obviously, the tackle count's just gone berserk as well since round 10. He's just getting nearly 10 tackles every single game, which just boosts his scoring potential even further. So when he does have these, 30 plus disposals, he's just hitting 140s quite easily. So it's a negative in my game that I need to try and improve on, but in the sense of trading him in this week, yeah, he's a easy option, but one of the best matchups, obviously, and he's super lowly owned, so he's a bit of a pod for you, and I don't think it's going to backfire this week. The weeks following is another question mark. Next 2 should be fine, I should say that. Colton are another easy matchup. The final 2, I think you just cop it on the chin if he does have a few weaker games here and there just to close out the season, but yeah, I guess the only other flag is Suns look like they're going to be primed to head into finals for the first time in their history. So will they look to manage their players at some point to get them cherry ripe, ready to go for finals? We'll have to wait and see about that, but I don't think it's something that we can try and predict too much. I don't think it's enough of a flag to not jump on Matt Rowell if you have the opportunity. So yeah, he's by far number 1. Just quick take a drink here, sorry guys. Sorry for that. Number 2, I have got Errol Gordon. Now, Errol hasn't been at his best for the last sort of 3 weeks. He's obviously gone 89, 86, and 98. Again, tougher one on the weekend, still scored quite well. North was a bit of a rough one to watch. I thought he was going to go massive in that one. Obviously, was in my top 5 captains. Didn't do amazingly, but his next 4 matches is pretty strong. Essendon, obviously, one of the best matchups you can have this time of the season with all their injuries. The likes of the likes of Lions is a bit tougher, but Giants and Eagles should be okay for him. So I think he can definitely be part of the top 8 midfielders for the remainder of the season. So I really like him at his price point and what his ceiling can be. Can definitely be a bit of a more of a unique option. Sub 10%, so definitely in that sort of camp as a bit of a more of a unique option. So I think he's one that you can jump on at number 2. Noah Anderson, obviously with the matchup, is someone that we're looking at as well. Just seems a competition, which is, again, a bad side of his game. 107 on the weekend, and where he didn't cop an attention. Oh, sorry, he copped a bit of attention post in the second quarter. Sorry, the second half. I think he went ballistic in the second quarter and just got clamped after that. But again, 2 good matchups followed by 2 bad ones. So he could be another one that just sneaks into the top 8 for the remainder of the season. He's been pretty solid all year, averaging 101. Has a pretty high ceiling, not high ceiling. His best score has been a 133, and then besides that's been a 122. And his floor can be pretty bad at times. Like, he's had a 60, 70s here and there, but most of the time it's an 80 plus. So I don't think it's the worst thing that you can go to. So here's another one that you could jump on to. At number 3. Number 4, if you're looking just for a very stable guy, the run doesn't indicate that he's going to have any sort of good position realistically, but based off what we saw with Zorko, he's got Collingwood, Sydney, Freo, and Hawks, very tough, all fighting for top 8 positions. Sorry, besides Sydney, but we know how tough they are at the moment. But with his recent form, 13, 15, 14 tackles, he's just hitting 110s for fun at the moment. So here's another one that you can just generally jump on and be pretty safe that he's going to be around that sort of mark as a 105 guy pretty safely. So if you're just looking for a safe option, you can't look too far besides Dunkley. And then at number 5, I've just thrown again another few M9 options, as a looping options. Davies, Kane's back for his first game for the Suns. I keep getting my teams mixed up right now. 111 straight off the bat, 81% time on ground, 30 touches, 10 tackles. Played as a full-time midfielder, so with Took out, he just slotted straight into that position, which was a bit of a surprise. You got likes of Flanders and Bailey Humphreys and also Fiorini that are all known as midfielders previously. So to throw Davies in there over the likes of them shows they have a lot of confidence in him, and that's where they want him playing. So I think he's a really good target at 657k as an extremely cheap M9 option that you can loop with. They play. Where do they play? They play the 340 game on Saturday, so the 4th game of the round. So again, you could throw him on the bench, put the emergency on him, have a look at him here, have a free hit because he does play Richmond this weekend, so he should have a fairly decent game, and then you can look to loop if that's an option that you will look at, because he is super achievable. Again, it's pretty much a sideways trade from a McCarthy and has a pretty good ceiling as well, because he did get that done against Brisbane, who are a tough matchup. So yeah, I really like this option if you can get there, in my opinion. And then Young is the other option as a cheaper one. Came on 57% time on ground for a 98, which is pretty amazing. Did kick 3 goals in there. That's the only sort of small flag that he wasn't playing as a full-time midfielder. He obviously does what he does and plays a bit of a half forward, goes as a bit of a marking target up forward, as like a Jordan Dawson type. He is very good overhead. So yeah, the only flags, there's probably too many flags for me here with the low time on ground, kicking a few too many goals. If he did it without kicking those goals and there was, indications that he was going to have more time on ground as he starts to get his body right, then definitely worthwhile at 750k. But when you've got Davies next to him at 100k cheaper, who's playing full-time midfield and has the time on ground, I think it's a pretty much a no-brainer in my opinion. You're going Davies over Young every day of the week in my opinion. So that's just where I sit. But if you're really a Hayden Young fan, then you could just go for there a bit more fun in my opinion there. So that is the midfielders, but a few others I didn't maybe speak about. Just trying to avoid all the DP. Bontempelli, you could always jump on there. Noting that he may cop a bit of attention this weekend. Maybe that's a Bedford. Maybe not. Who knows? But he's obviously in some ripping form the last couple of weeks. So if you just can't be without him, definitely jump on him if you want to. Pasta, he probably could have been part of the number 5 option as a bit of a looping option at M9. But again, he's quite expensive at 908k. I personally couldn't do it as good as he has been. I'd probably just go with the 250k cheaper in Davies with a better role. So same team, so I just go there. I don't see why you'd go pay up for a Fiorini, who's playing a not so fantasy relevant role, where he's playing a bit more half forward, a bit of wing, just really all over the ground, not around the ball consistently. So yeah, that's just my opinion there. Moving down the list, yeah, getting fairly unique here. So I'll move on, I think. Quickly touching on the rucks, if you're looking to make a ruck move, I don't think many people will be, but yeah, if you are, then it is Rowan Marshall is my pick of the bunch. He has by far the best run on the way home. 4 really easy matchups. Got a cherry-less ruck against North this weekend, which could be a 140, 150 quite simply up against Teakle there. So he should just have an absolute blinder. So yeah, he's by far going to be the one that gives you the most reward this weekend and in the weekends prior. Number 2, I do have Max Gawn. He again does have a really good run, as we've known. Next 3 are really strong. Dust Cameron is the only trickier one of the bunch, but yeah, expecting him to go quite well over the next period of time, and obviously as a captain option. At a cheaper price. Rowan Marshall and Max Gawn are at the exact same price, so you can choose whoever you like. The other thing I wanted to mention with the rucks is the fact that all 3 of the major rucks, being Brodie Grundy, Max Gawn, and Rowan Marshall, I think I didn't say that one. Brodie Grundy, Gawn, and Marshall, all 3 of them are not in finals contention. So they're in teams that are not fighting for finals. So is there potential that they could start looking at resting these guys just because they're not playing for anything? Do they start to rest the Max Gawn? It's something that I haven't considered too much, but it's a flag nonetheless. Max Gawn is 33, but again, he is fighting for a All-Australian blazer. He's well up there in the contention. So is Brodie Grundy. Rowan Marshall probably isn't as much. So maybe that's a bit more of a flag on his side, but yeah, I still think he's a great option with the run home. He's the youngest of the bunch, I believe, is 29, whereas Brodie Grundy's 31. So he should be good to go. And obviously with Heath out of the side, he is the number 1 ruck again, and we know what ceiling he can have there. Number 3, though, I did have the likes of Brodie Grundy. If you just want to pay up for the top guys, again, his run is okay. In saying okay, it's pretty damn good. He's only got 1 tougher game against McInerney, but he's got a Goldstein this weekend. Then he's got the likes of Geelong, who it could be a Stanley, could be an SDK, whoever they decide to ruck on that weekend, and obviously finishes off with the likes of the Eagles for the grand final. So that should be another pretty big one. And number 4, I just had Tim English. I think you want to own one of these 4 guys. I think it's pretty much that simple. Tim English just does have, in my opinion, he's just that one step behind these guys, just because, he doesn't have a huge ceiling. Like, he does have a decent ceiling, but he hasn't shown it as consistently as the other guys, and does have the likes of Max Gawn in 2 weeks' time, so that could be the tougher one of the lot, and then does finish off with the Twin Towers at Freo there, so that could be another one that doesn't quite get up, but the next round 21 and round 23 should be all good to go. So yeah, that's why he is just number 4. So that is the Ruck's trade-ins. I don't think I need to discuss too much more of that. I guess the interesting discussion is if you own like a Darcy Cameron, would I be jumping off? It's definitely a worthwhile discussion because he probably is that 15, 20, even 25 points off of these top three, particularly top four, even. Because he does have a tougher run. Oscar McInerney this week, does have Meek next week, which is an easy one, but then does finish off with two tough ones. So he's probably going to be 100, 150 points off of the other four guys over the next 4 week period. If he just stays going to be 25 points off of those guys, then yeah, I do think he's definitely someone that if you can, I'd be jumping off as well. Just getting to these best guys possible. It's only costing you about 50k, so that's just my opinion. It's an easy upgrade. It's quite an easy one just to be like, yep, this is going to happen because we know Ruck's quite well when it comes to matchups. There's no concerns there. So that's an easy one. You could get 25 points of upgrade quite simply. That could have the potential to have 50 points if you go into a Rowan Marshall or a Max Gorn. They could easily put 50 points on Darcy Cameron this weekend. So definitely worthwhile considering that one if he's in your side. Starting to lose my voice, but we'll finish off with the forwards. This is probably where a lot of us are trading because again, forwards are just dog shit, as we know. And it's none other than Jeremy Cameron this weekend. I think a lot of people are looking at him. I think I've already spoken about him a little bit in terms of reason why to trade him in. Obviously, he went massive on the weekend with 11 goals, which is just unreal to see that be a part of that in that game, which was unreal to witness. 11 goals won nonetheless, just absolutely monstered it. Didn't look like missing all day. 157 is monstrous as well. So, and now he's on the ton watch. He is up to 69 goals in the Coleman, so he's 31 goals away from the ton that we haven't seen since 2008. So, I think his team will be doing everything possible to try and get him there for the remainder of the season, particularly in the home and away season. Maybe when it comes to finals, it won't be as prominent because premierships come over everything else. So I think for the next 4 weeks, they're really going to be trying to get him the most ball as possible. And up against Port Adelaide, a very decent matchup. He obviously scored the likes of 7 goals against them early in the season. I probably should go back and see if Radicalio or the likes of Aliyah was playing in that game. Don't fully have awareness of that. Let me just quickly check that while we continue. But yeah, he's also got Essendon the week after. So he had kicked 6 goals against them that round in round 14. But we've known since then they've become even more of a rabble. So he should have an even greater day realistic. This could be another 10-goal haul. So that could be another one that we definitely want to be a part of. Then he's got finished off with Richmond. Again, he played them early in the season as well. And where did he play them? He played them here only a couple weekends ago, and he scored 4 goals, 5. So that could have been a 9-goal haul, and he scored the 117. So he is potentially going to average 6 or 7 goals over the next 4-week period. Sydney being the only tougher one in that matchup. And yeah, still could. Obviously, he's going to get plenty of supply in there. So I really like Jeremy Cameron as an option from here on out. Should have the supply, should have the scores, and I'm not willing to write off him as a potential captaincy option. And also, he's probably going to be one of the top forwards for the remainder of the season. Hopefully, averaging over 100 with some very nice goals. Just touching on that Port Adelaide game, both Radicalio and Aliyah were both playing that game, so he potentially has an even better day against Port Adelaide with no Radicalio playing at the moment, with Aliyah only one in there, and Zerk Thatcher, which he should break Zerk Thatcher pretty easily. So, yeah, I still really like him as a great option. It's only realistically the flag of Sydney, and hopefully by that stage, if you're not in that position already, you could have a potential F7 to loop him with and see how it goes. Let me just quickly see when they play in that game. They play the second last game of the round, so that's a bit unfortunate. That means you do have to roll into it, but hopefully you can have a look at something else beforehand and just lock that away. But yeah, here's number 2. I did have Baz Smith at number 1 if you are a non-owner. I was really pushing people to jump back on him last week, and obviously, he went massive with a 132. So if you're not owner, again, I'd just be breaking the bank, try and get him in. The run's the exact same, so he's going to have a field day, and he's by far F1. He's astronomically better than all the other forwards at this stage. So he is just one that you need to get back in your side as soon as possible. Probably the biggest priority if you can. Probably just behind Nas, I would say. That's probably the only other one I'd consider ahead of him. But number 3, I did have Matt Kennedy if you are a non-owner there. Again, he's just found his form after a poor couple of weeks there with a bit of illness and whatnot. He's just getting back to what he does at these low tons. A decent run home, Melbourne and Eagles and even Freo's okay. Giants this weekend is the only sort of small flag that you may not get the instant reward that you're looking for, but he should still be very good. He scored a 107 against them early in the year, did kick 2 goals in that though, so expecting just sort of a 90 to 105 sort of score. So yeah, definitely worthwhile jumping on there as a bit of an upgrade. Number 4, Brian Myers has been very, very solid for a period of time. Again, same run as the Cats, so he's going to have a pretty good field day. Even getting a bit of time in the midfield as well, which is increasing his floor just that slight amount, probably from 70 to the 80 mark. So he's very unlikely to drop anything below 80 now, and does have a ceiling of a 130 every now and then. So definitely worthwhile jumping on him. He's definitely part of the top 6 forwards for the remainder of this season. And finally, I put in Jack Macrae. It's still hard to look past the fixture that he has and not undeniably say that he's not going to do well. He obviously did well on the weekend with a 94. Probably should have been a bit bigger, but did get caught on the bench for a big period of that last quarter, which is a bit unfortunate for owners. Comes up against North this weekend, who are the best matchup for inside mids. The only thing with that though, Macrae has seen a slight decrease in his inside mid usage over the last couple of weeks. I'll probably even worthwhile showing you that here if you guys can see that. He is down to 45% and 47% over the last 2 weeks and 57% before that. So he's not getting those sort of 70-80% time we saw at the start of the season. So that's the only small flag. But I still think he's going to be a worthwhile option up forward there with the matchups he has coming. So if you want to spend up a little bit more, he is a bit more expensive, so definitely worthwhile target. But a couple others that we need to mention, if you're looking for like an F7, a Dan Curtin, he's an interesting one. Obviously, he's gone quite well, only dropped the 50 in the last sort of period of time. So if you want to go there, he is a bit more expensive now though, so I probably still wouldn't go there. But again, does have the Eagles and does have North to finish off the year, so definitely something to consider. Peatling's probably one I'm more in favour of. He's playing a lot more inside mid. If I show you that here, he played full-time CBAs on the weekend with 81%, his best of the season so far. We saw John Dawson, even Saligo spend a lot more time forward. So something's going on at Port Adelaide, whether they're just resting their players throughout just to really get them cherry ripe for the final couple of weeks. As they come up against some tougher opponents. You got Hawks this weekend, Collingwood in a couple of weeks as well. So, yeah, trying to get them cherry ripe for those sort of games and leading into finals. Seems like a pretty safe one that's going to get sort of 50 to 70% time in the midfield, and we know what he can do when he's in there. At sub 800k is something worthwhile. So, definitely one that's achievable. Simpkin, I don't really rate this one too much, even though he does have the capacity to go, 90s and has a ceiling. Just the role is so inconsistent and not fantasy inducive that I just don't like it as much. So couldn't jump on that one. Jackson, I probably wouldn't be jumping on if I was an owner now, just with the flags of Hayden Young back in that midfield. It is slowly decreasing his numbers. And obviously with Sean Darcy, having a bit more fitness, that does mean he's getting less and less of the Ruck contest as well. So, yeah, he's not spending as much time in the midfield, but still getting it done with consistent 80s and 90s. Tougher game this weekend, though, against, TDK and Pitnet, if Pitnet does play. So, yeah, worthwhile not training into that if you're not an owner. I don't think he's going to hurt you this week. Sam Darcy's still worthwhile, F7 if you want to go there. He obviously got the reward on the weekend. Does have a tougher one this week though, with the likes of what's his name, Sam Taylor. I assume Sam Taylor's going to stand on him. That does probably mean that Norton's going to have a bit of a field day though, with no Buckley. So that's something to be notable of. Chiraka should be another one, decent one this weekend against the Eagles. Hopefully he gets some reward there. He's been super up and down, but should be okay. Dylan Moore again, more expensive now, nearly 900k. Tougher games to finish off the year, so it's probably not one I wouldn't look at either. But if Hawks want to make it into finals, I think this man's going to need to stand up a little bit. So could be one that you can jump on. There's just so many forward options that you could look at. Honestly, there's a lot of cheap options that you can risk it with. I went with Jack Martin a couple weeks ago. That's obviously not worked out in my favour. Stephen Coniglio has been okay. Back-to-back sort of 70s, playing as a full-time midfielder at the moment. Lower time on ground, but the matchups are here and there, so should be okay. I think the next 3 weeks is actually pretty good for Coniglio in terms of midfielders. So, yeah, definitely someone you could look at with not a huge amount of confidence. Tim Kelly is the one that I was looking at trading in early in the week. Obviously playing a bit more time on the midfield now after a stint in the Waffle. Harley Reid out probably just means there's more points available for the overall team. So I definitely think there's worse options than Tim Kelly. 540k is super cheap and with an okay run. So he's definitely worthwhile. But yeah, realistically getting into a lot of unique options now. But yeah, that's probably where I'm at. A couple of pods I wanted to mention that I sort of skipped over in the midfield was the likes of Finn Callahan. I think he's one that has been underrated so far this year for what he's been doing. He's shown that he has the capacity to be a tackling machine, but also knows how to spread and get the marks as well. Just hasn't really put it together where he's getting both at the same time. It's either 8 tackles, 3 marks, or he's getting 6 marks, 3 tackles, sort of, or 8 tackles, 2 8 marks, 2 tackles. So needs to just start putting it together and get it all in one game to hit these massive ceilings. So I think over the next period of time, 3 weeks particularly, he could be a decent pod. He is sub 9%, so he is someone that you could consider with one of the better runs on the run home. So there's that one. Heaney's also another one. Should have a very good game against Essendon. We know what he can do in these worse games. So playing against bottom teams, we saw that 166 against North last weekend. We could see a very similar sort of matchup this weekend against Essendon. So another one that you could look at trading into. Tougher for 22 and 23, but then does finish off the Eagles in the grand final. So again, should be really good, that one. So I could see him averaging 105 in the next 4 weeks. So definitely someone to be worth considering. I think he's 11%, so he's a little bit more owned and a bit more pricey, so someone to consider there. But yeah, if you want to really go pod, Matt Rowe's probably your man, realistically, at the end of the day. So that's probably about it for the trading targets. Just to sort of cap off my top 5, I think the likes of Whitfield's probably up there at number 1. No, sorry, Jeremy Cameron's number 1. Whitfield's probably number 2. If you don't have Desire, he's number 3. You just need him as well. Number 4, I'm just really working off the top of my head here, is probably the likes of Jack Sinclair. And then number 5, I'm trying to think who's a decent mid option here, is probably the likes of Matt Rowe. Matt Rowe probably should have been up there a bit higher, but yeah, he just slotted in there. So not too much thought. That's just really off the top of my head at the end of the day. My trades though, just to finish off the video here, my trades have changed a little bit. I'm looking to do just a bit of a rookie downgrade, so moving off Liddy, moving off Loman, and that gets me to Jeremy Cameron as an F7 option, and that just brings in Bo Allen. Now, the reason I'm bringing in Bo Allen is to free up the likes of Tom McCarthy. I've had Tom McCarthy just sit at, D7 for a long period of time, and I haven't been able to move him, but bringing in that extra defender just allows him to be freed up, whether I want to loop him in the defensive line or the midfield line, probably in the midfield line this week, with the likes of Caleb Daniel. Yes, Caleb Daniel is in my midfield for some stupid reason. Don't question it too much. But I'm also looking at looping the likes of Rankin with the likes of Jack Martin this weekend. So Rankin does play Friday night against Hawks. If he does, 70 plus, I'll probably just take it and then roll into the likes of Jack Martin. take it by putting like Closey on or Rivers, whoever it's going to be. And same with Tom McCarthy. He plays a third game, see how it goes. I can loop on with Rivers or even Ted Closey, whoever I really want to. So I have a decent amount of looping options. I have thought about looping, the likes of Zach Merritt just with the tag options, but I'm just going to back him in, I think, as being one of the better midfielders at the moment. I just don't think I want to loop in the defensive line just because I'm pretty happy with all these sort of guys. You're not touching Wang or Sinclair. Rosie's, yes, he's got some injury concerns, but he's still capable of putting up very decent scores. One thing I didn't mention, he still had 95% on time on ground last weekend, which is his best so far this year, or equal best so far this year, even with the injury concerns, which is just massive, considering the injury there. So, yeah, I like to see that. Sheasel, very safe. I don't think I'm looking at looping him at all. And Mills has a decent matchup against the Bombers this weekend, so I'm not looking at looping him at all. But in future weeks, I potentially will look at looping him at that stage. So I think this just opens up my flexibility a little bit this weekend and try to maximize my scoring on field. Yes, I probably could trade out the likes of Caleb Daniel or Rankin and get the likes of Jeremy Cameron and Jack McRae, but that then leads the likes of Jack Martin still on my field, which I really want to try and avoid. And I can't unfortunately trade out Jack Martin and another premium without getting another equally as risky sort of forward option. So I think this is one of the best ways that I can get another decent option in Jeremy Cameron, who I think is someone that we highly need to target this week. Be able to loop Jack Martin with Isaac Rankin and go from there this week. But yeah, that is trade mode this week, guys. Hopefully you have enjoyed. Please leave any questions you have down below. I will answer those as quick as possible. This will be coming out a bit earlier than it does throughout the week. Just changing with a few schedules here and there. But besides that, you'll see captains on Thursday before team is announced. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But yeah, that's obviously going quite well. But yeah, hopefully you guys go well this weekend, and I will see you later. Cheers, guys.